You want your wine back, mother? I'll send it to your cell. That's what I whispered to myself as I sat in my car outside my brother's wedding reception. Pinot Noir still dripping from my chin onto my white blouse. 30 seconds earlier, my stepmother had grabbed a full glass of red wine and thrown it directly into my face in front of 150 guests because I refused to hand over the deed to my apartment. My brother didn't flinch. My father slow clapped, and every single person at that table just stared at me like I was the one who ruined the evening. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything back. I took the cloth napkin from my lap, dabbed my face, stood up, and walked out of the ballroom without looking back. But before I tell you how I dismantled my entire family's empire in exactly 19 days, tell me something in the comments. Have you ever been the person your family used up and then blamed for being empty? I read every single one. I drove home with the windows down because the smell of wine on my skin was making me nauseous. Not the alcohol itself, but what it represented. 28 years of being their spare parts drawer, and this was the moment it finally clicked. I'm not dramatic. I'm not emotional. My name is Elena. I'm 31 years old, and I'm a forensic data analyst for one of the largest insurance companies in the Midwest. My entire job is to look at a pile of numbers that seem perfectly normal on the surface and find the one thread that, when pulled, unravels 100 lies. I find patterns for a living, and I had been ignoring the biggest pattern in my own life for over a decade. I got home, locked the door, changed out of my stained clothes, and sat at my kitchen table with a glass of water and my laptop. My hands were shaking, but my brain was already running the numbers. That's what I do when the world goes sideways. I don't cry first, I calculate first. The crying can wait. It always can. Let me back up. My father, Richard, married my stepmother, Diane, when I was 9. My mother had passed away from pancreatic cancer when I was 7, and for 2 years it was just me and my dad, eating cereal for dinner, watching old movies on the couch, learning how to be a broken little family that still worked. Then Diane arrived with her 8-year-old son, Tyler, and everything I knew about my father evaporated like a puddle in July. Tyler was everything I wasn't. Loud where I was quiet, confident where I was careful, charming in that way where adults couldn't see through him, but every kid in the room could. He broke things and blamed me. He lied about grades and got praised. He stole money from my piggy bank, and when I reported it, my father told me I should learn to share. But here's the thing people don't understand about golden children. They don't become golden on their own. Someone has to polish them. And my father and Diane spent the next 20 years polishing Tyler with my resources, my patience, and eventually, my identity. I didn't know about the identity theft until I was 26. I had been living on my own since 18, working full-time while putting myself through college because the education fund my biological mother had left for me had apparently been invested poorly and lost during the 2008 recession. At least, that's what Richard told me when I was 17. I believed him because he was my father. And what 17-year-old audits their own parent? I worked nights at a distribution warehouse and days at community college, transferred to a state university on a partial scholarship, and graduated with a degree in data science while carrying $30,000 in student loans. I was proud of that. I built it with nothing. Meanwhile, Tyler dropped out of business school twice, launched 4 failed startups, leased a BMW he couldn't afford, and lived in a downtown loft that Diane insisted Richard help pay for because Tyler needed to look successful to become successful. Sound familiar? Every scapegoat knows that sentence by heart. The golden child needs to look the part. You need to play yours. The identity theft started when I was 23. I found out 3 years later when I applied for a mortgage on a small, one-bedroom apartment. The loan officer looked at me with that particular expression, the one that says, "I'm about to ruin your day," and told me my credit report showed 4 open credit cards I'd never applied for, 2 personal loans, and a small business line of credit through the SBA, all in my name, all maxed out, totaling $614,000. I remember sitting in that office feeling like the floor had turned to water beneath me. I asked to see the accounts. The addresses tied to 3 of the credit cards were Tyler's downtown loft. The SBA loan listed a company called Pinnacle Venture Group, LLC, which, I would later discover, was Tyler's latest startup, a marketing consultancy that had no clients, no revenue, and no purpose other than funneling borrowed money into his lifestyle. I confronted my father that Thanksgiving. I brought the credit report. I brought the printouts. I laid everything on the dining room table between the turkey and the cranberry sauce and asked him to explain. Diane burst into tears. Tyler left the room. And my father, the man who used to read me bedtime stories after my mother died, looked me in the eyes and said, "Elena, family helps family." Tyler needed a boost. You weren't using your credit. We were going to pay it all back before you ever noticed. We didn't think you'd try to buy property so soon. He said it like I had been inconsiderate, like by trying to build a life, I had inconvenienced their theft. Diane chimed in between sobs. You've always been so independent, Elena. Tyler isn't like you. He needs support. If you go to the police, you'll destroy this family. Is that what your mother would have wanted? She invoked my dead mother. She used the memory of a woman she never met as a weapon against that woman's daughter. I sat there, looking at 3 people who had robbed me and were now asking me to feel guilty for noticing. I didn't go to the police. That was my mistake, and I own it. I spent the next 2 years cleaning up the damage myself. I disputed the accounts, froze my credit, filed identity theft reports with the FTC, and slowly, painfully, rebuilt my score, point by point. I managed to buy my apartment a year later, a small 1-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. I paid for it with everything I had. It was mine, the one thing in my life no one had touched. Until the wedding. Tyler was marrying a woman named Kristen, whose family owned a chain of dental practices. Diane saw dollar signs. The rehearsal dinner was at a country club. The wedding was at a historic estate. And my role, as always, was to show up, smile, and pretend we were a normal family. I did it because some bruised part of me still believed that if I performed well enough, they might one day see me. They might say thank you. They might finally say sorry. Instead, during the reception, between the salad course and the entree, Diane stood up, clinked her glass, and gave a speech. It started sweet. Tyler, my beautiful boy. Kristen, welcome to the family. But then, it turned. She looked directly at me, sitting at the far end of the family table, and said that in the spirit of family unity and new beginnings, she hoped that certain members of the family would consider putting the past behind them and contributing to Tyler and Kristen's future. Specifically, she announced to the entire room that I had agreed to transfer ownership of my apartment to Tyler and Kristen as a wedding gift so they could start their marriage in a real home. She said this with a smile. She said it like it was already done. I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't even been asked. The table turned to look at me, and I saw 150 faces waiting for me to nod along. Tyler raised his champagne glass. Kristen beamed. My father gave me that look, the one that said, "Don't embarrass me." I said no, clearly and calmly. I said I had not agreed to give away my apartment, and I would not be doing so. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Diane's face twisted. She grabbed the nearest wine glass, a full pour of red, crossed the 3 feet between us, and threw it in my face. It hit my eyes, my mouth, soaked into my hair. Red wine ran down my white blouse like a wound. She leaned in close and hissed, "You selfish little parasite. After everything we've done for you." My father said nothing. Tyler smirked. Kristen covered her mouth, but her eyes were amused. And I sat there for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, wine burning my eyes, napkin in my hand, and I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to stop being their daughter and start being what I actually am. An analyst. Someone who finds the lie in the numbers and follows it to the end. I drove home, showered, changed, and opened my laptop. I wasn't emotional. I was operational. The first thing I did was pull my own comprehensive credit report from all 3 bureaus. I needed to see if the cleanup I'd done 2 years ago had held, or if they'd started again. It hadn't held. They'd started again. There were 2 new accounts opened in the past 8 months, both after I thought the nightmare was over. A credit card with a $12,000 balance and a personal loan for $45,000. The mailing address on both was Tyler's old loft. But the loft was supposed to be gone. He was supposed to have moved in with Kristen. I looked up the property records. The loft lease had ended 6 months ago, but someone was still receiving mail there. The building manager's contact was listed online. I emailed them, posing as a concerned relative helping with a forwarding address. They confirmed the unit was now leased by Pinnacle Venture Group, LLC. Tyler hadn't shut down the shell company. He was still running it, still using my name. My blood went cold, not hot. When you work in forensic analysis, you learn that the angriest reaction is rarely the most effective one. The most effective reaction is the one built on evidence, patience, and timing. I had the first 2. Now I needed to find the third. I spent the next 72 hours doing what I do best. I pulled every public record I could find on Pinnacle Venture Group. The LLC was registered in Delaware, which meant minimal public disclosure, but the registered agent was a budget service that used a standard template. Tyler hadn't even bothered to use a different formation service than the one I'd already identified 2 years ago. Narcissists aren't just arrogant, they're lazy. They assume they'll never get caught because they've never been caught. I found the SBA loan, the one originally taken out in my name 3 years ago. It hadn't been closed. It had been refinanced. Someone had submitted updated financial statements showing income and assets that didn't exist, along with my social security number, to increase the loan amount to $180,000. That wasn't just identity theft anymore. That was federal loan fraud. Lying to the SBA is lying to the federal government. Then I found the thread that tied everything together. My father's name showed up on an insurance claim filed 7 months earlier. Richard worked for a mid-sized construction firm and managed their equipment fleet. The claim was for $220,000 in damaged heavy machinery, supposedly ruined in a warehouse fire. I recognized the adjusting company's name. It wasn't my employer, but it was a competitor, and I had access to industry databases. I pulled the fire report. The warehouse was leased by, you guessed it, Pinnacle Venture Group LLC. The equipment listed as destroyed had serial numbers that matched assets my father's employer had reported as decommissioned and scrapped 2 years earlier. Richard hadn't lost equipment in a fire. He'd reported already scrapped machinery as active inventory, staged a fire at his stepson's warehouse, and filed a fraudulent insurance claim for equipment that no longer existed. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't a family squabble. This was a criminal enterprise. My father and Tyler had been running parallel frauds, one targeting my identity and federal lending, the other targeting an insurance company, and the money from both had been flowing into the same shell company, paying for Tyler's wedding, his lifestyle, his BMW, his dream of being a CEO without doing any of the work. And they had done all of it using me, my name, my credit, my social security number, my silence. The daughter they threw wine at was the same daughter whose identity was funding their entire operation. I called my friend Nadia. She was a white-collar defense attorney who I'd met at a compliance conference 2 years ago. We'd stayed in touch because we shared the same dark sense of humor about financial crime. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time. Elena, she finally said, this isn't a lawyer problem. This is a federal agent problem. You need to go to the FBI. The SBA fraud alone is enough, but combined with the insurance scheme and the identity theft across state lines, you're looking at a RICO-adjacent pattern. This is serious. I know, I said, but I need to do something first. If I report now, they'll get spooked. Tyler checks his accounts. If he sees any activity or gets any notifications, he'll start destroying evidence. I need them to think everything is fine. I need them to think they won. What are you going to do? I'm going to give them what they want. The next morning, I called Diane. I apologized for the scene at the wedding. I told her I'd been emotional, that I overreacted, that she was right about family sticking together. I could hear the triumph in her voice, thick and sweet like syrup. She told me she forgave me, that they all did, that Tyler and Kristen would love the apartment. She asked when I could sign the transfer paperwork. I told her I needed 2 weeks to sort out the mortgage details with my bank. 2 weeks. That was my window. Day 1, I walked into the FBI field office in my city and asked to speak with someone in the Financial Crimes Division. I brought a flash drive containing every document I'd compiled: credit reports, SBA loan records, LLC filings, insurance claims, the fire report, serial number comparisons, bank statements showing money flown from both fraud schemes into Pinnacle Venture Group, and then out to personal accounts belonging to Tyler and Richard. The agent who reviewed my file was a woman named Calloway. She was calm and methodical, the kind of person who reads every page before asking a single question. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "How long have you known about this?" The identity theft? 2 years. The full scope? About 72 hours. She nodded. And the subjects are your father and stepbrother. Not a question, a confirmation. Yes. She closed the folder. We're going to need your cooperation on something, if you're willing. I was willing. The plan was simple. Diane had arranged a family dinner at my father's house the following Sunday. It was supposed to be a celebration, a reconciliation where I would sign over my apartment and everyone would pretend we were whole again. Instead, it would be the last dinner my family ever had together outside of a visitation room. Calloway's team set up recording equipment in my car and fitted me with a wire so thin I couldn't feel it against my skin. My job was straightforward. Get Tyler and Richard talking about the money. Get them to mention Pinnacle. Get them to acknowledge the accounts in my name. I didn't need a confession. I just needed confirmation. The documents did the heavy lifting. The wire was the bow on top. I drove to my father's house that Sunday with a bottle of wine, a gift bag for Tyler and Kristen, and a feeling in my chest like standing at the edge of a high dive. The house smelled like Diane's pot roast, the one she made when she wanted everyone to feel like we were in a commercial for family values. Tyler greeted me at the door with a hug. First time in years. He was already spending my apartment in his mind. Over dinner, I played my role. I asked Tyler about Kristen, about the honeymoon plans, about his business. He talked freely because, for the first time in his life, he thought I was on his team. When I asked about Pinnacle, casually, like a sister interested in her brother's success, he didn't hesitate. "Oh, man," he said, leaning back in his chair. "It's been a wild ride. The SBA loan gave us the runway, and Dad's insurance connection helped cover some unexpected costs. We're finally in the black, Elena. That's why this apartment thing means so much. It's not about the property. It's about knowing you believe in what we're building." He said it with a straight face. The apartment he hadn't paid a penny for, funded by loans taken in my stolen name, supplemented by insurance money from a staged fire. And he called it believing in what they're building. My father chimed in. "We've made some mistakes, Elena. Your stepmother and I, we should have told you about the accounts sooner. But everything we did for the family. The insurance claim covered a real loss. The SBA loan is in the company's name." "It's in my name, Dad," I said softly. He paused, took a sip of his whiskey. "Well, technically. But Tyler's been making the payments. We're going to transfer it all into his name once his credit improves." There it was, on tape. I didn't need anything else. But Diane, who could never resist twisting the knife, added one more thing. "And honestly, Elena, after what you put us through at the wedding, this is the least you can do. We kept you fed and clothed for 9 years. That apartment is a small price for a childhood." She was billing me for my own childhood. The one funded by my dead mother's life insurance that I would later discover had also been quietly redirected into my father's personal account when I was 11. But that discovery came later, after the forensic audit. That night, all I needed was what I already had. I signed nothing. I told them I'd bring the paperwork next week. I hugged Tyler at the door. I shook my father's hand. I kissed Diane on the cheek. And I drove home, removed the wire, and delivered the recording to Agent Calloway the next morning. The arrests happened on a Tuesday. I wasn't there for Tyler's. He was picked up at a coffee shop near his new apartment, still wearing the Rolex he'd bought with money borrowed in my name. According to Calloway, he cried immediately and tried to call Diane. I was there for my father's, not because I wanted to watch, because the FBI asked me to be present when they executed the search warrant at his office. They needed someone who could identify relevant documents quickly. So I stood in the hallway of the construction company where my father had worked for 22 years and watched 2 agents walk him out of his corner office in handcuffs while his coworkers stared through glass walls. He saw me. His face didn't show anger. It showed something worse. Confusion. Like he genuinely could not understand how the person he'd used as raw material for 3 decades had turned out to be the machine that processed him. "Elena," he said, his voice breaking, "I'm your father." "I know," I said. "That's why I gave you every chance to stop." They let him out. I went back to identifying documents. Diane was arrested at the house that afternoon. She wasn't charged with the fraud directly, but with conspiracy and aiding and abetting. She had co-signed on 2 of the credit accounts in my name, and her fingerprints were on the SBA loan application. She hadn't just known, she'd participated. When the officers arrived, she reportedly asked if she could change out of her bathrobe first because she didn't want to be photographed looking like that. Even in handcuffs, her first thought was the audience. The charges, when they were fully compiled, read like a syllabus for a white-collar crime seminar. For Tyler, bank fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, SBA loan fraud, and money laundering. For my father, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and obstruction. For Diane, conspiracy and aiding identity theft. Tyler faced up to 30 years. My father, up to 20. Diane, up to 5. The house was seized. The accounts were frozen. Pinnacle Venture Group was dissolved. Tyler's BMW was repossessed. Kristen's family quietly filed for annulment. And my apartment, the one bedroom I'd bought with my own money, the one they tried to take from me as a wedding gift, stayed exactly where it was. Mine. The trial took 11 months. I testified twice. Tyler's defense attorney tried to paint me as a vindictive sibling motivated by jealousy. I sat on the stand with my folder of evidence, my timeline of fraud, and my 3 credit reports showing $600,000 of debt I never incurred. and I answered every question with the same calm I use when I present findings to my employer's legal team. Numbers don't have favorites. Data doesn't take sides. I didn't need the jury to like me. I needed them to follow the math. Tyler got 14 years. My father got 9. Diane got 3.5. The judge noted that the pattern of exploitation was among the most sustained and calculated he had seen in a domestic fraud case. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse alone. No one was waiting for me. No friends with balloons. No dramatic moment in the rain. Just a Tuesday afternoon in October. The kind where the air smells like someone nearby is burning leaves. I walked 6 blocks to a coffee shop, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window. My phone was lighter than it had ever been. 3 contacts deleted. Not blocked. Deleted. There's a difference. Blocking means you're still thinking about them. Deleting means they no longer exist in your architecture. People ask me if I feel guilty. I don't. Guilt requires the belief that you had another option, and I've run the numbers on every alternative. If I hadn't acted, Tyler would still be opening accounts in my name. My father would still be filing false claims. Diane would still be telling me I owed them for the privilege of being their punching bag. They didn't leave me a door marked mercy. They only left me 1 marked evidence. I finished my coffee, left a good tip, and walked to the subway. My apartment was waiting for me. My job was waiting for me. My life, the one I built from nothing while they stole everything, was waiting for me. I used to think justice was making them pay for what they took. Now I know it's simpler than that. Justice is the moment you stop letting them withdraw from your account. Not your bank account, your life account. Your energy, your patience, your hope that this time they'll be different. They won't be different, but you can be. You can be the one who finally pulls the thread. If you've ever been the family member who carried everyone and got blamed for being tired, drop the word survivor in the comments. And if this story reminded you of someone who needs to hear it, share it. Because somewhere right now, there's another Elena sitting at her kitchen table, wine still drying in her hair, wondering if she's crazy for being angry. She's not crazy. She's just not finished yet.